Council's Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent, so welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some of our housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to do so to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside of the building. Firstly, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Corney, Dew, Gulson and Jordan.
Thank you. We'll move on to number one, our minutes. So this is to approve the minutes for our last meeting held on the 20th of March 2023. Are we all in favour that these are a correct record? Right, moving on to item number 2, which is the members' interests. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in relation to any items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest with regard to item 3A, as I'm both the County Councillor and District Councillor for Auchenbury Weston.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just declare interest on item 3D, as I'm the ward member for Holywell Common Edenworth, which includes Erith.
Are there any other members with a declaration of interest? In that case, we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is 3A, and this is an application in Auchenbury Weston. And I invite our planning officer, Lucy Bateman, to present that to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This application is referred to Development Management Committee as the officer recommendation of approval is contrary to Auchenbury Weston Parish Council's recommendation of refusal. The application site forms part of the residential garden of number 9 High Street in the village of Auchenbury Weston and is located within the conservation area. It's proposed to subdivide number 9's plot and construct a 4-bedroom dwelling. The site is served by an existing access from the High Street, and that runs between number 9 and number 5 High Street. This access currently serves 3 dwellings, number 9, 3 chimneys and Westbrook. The area is currently maintained grass with fruit trees and hedges and forms part of the garden of number 9. The building to the north of the site is the garage and workshop associated with number 9. It should be noted that there's an extant permission for its change of use to a dwelling, which was granted a couple of years ago. As set out in the report, the site falls within the built-up area of a small settlement, and therefore the principle of development is acceptable and complies with policy LP9 of the local plan. The proposed dwelling would be sited to the rear of number 9 and to the west of 3 chimneys. It would utilise the existing shared access and would have a driveway to the front with turning area and space for 2 parked cars, and a cycle store is also proposed to the rear of the proposed dwelling. You'll notice that an escape gate is proposed on the southern boundary of the site. Whilst the majority of the site, including the new dwelling, would be at low risk of flooding in flood zone 1, the existing access from High Street is within flood zones 2 and 3. The submitted flood risk assessment sets out that the access would be at risk during a 1 in 100 chance each year event, and in such events, the use of the access would be restricted. So an emergency pedestrian access and egress is proposed via this escape gate to the public open space to the south, which is flood zone 1. It should also be noted that other flood mitigation measures are proposed. These include raising the floor level of the dwelling 0.3 metres above ground level and incorporating flood resilient construction. The applicant's agent has also confirmed that surface water will be disposed of via SUDS, full details of which is recommended be secured by condition, and this is to ensure that there's no increased flood risk to surrounding properties. The proposed dwelling has a gable-ended roof design with a forward and rear projecting 2-storey gable. The materials are brick walls, natural slate roof tiles, and UPVC windows and doors. As set out in the report, it's considered that the design, siting, and scale respects the character and appearance of the surrounding area. And the proposed elevations also show the proposed ecological enhancements, and that includes a bat box, a starling box, and sparrow boxes. So the photo on screen now, that's the existing shared access between number 5 Brook Cottage on the left and number 9 is on the right. In terms of potential neighbour amenity impacts on number 5, as set out in the report, it's not considered that the additional vehicle movements associated with the additional dwelling would result in a detrimental increase in noise or disturbance. This photo shows the access between the garage of 3 chimneys, which is just on the right behind the tree, and then that's the roof of number 9 on the left. The driveway would be created on the grassed area on the right of the photo, and boundary treatment installed to number 9 to divide the curtilages of the existing and proposed dwelling. This is the view looking south. The dwelling would be sited roughly in line with 3 chimneys, which you can see on the left. The proposal would result in the removal of these fruit trees that you can see in the forefront of the photo. These are considered to have limited visual and public value, and a landscaping condition is proposed, is recommended, and this is to ensure that there would be suitable replacement soft landscaping. The next photo, this is looking towards the east, and you can see 3 chimneys and the dormer window on that property. You'll note that there are some semi-mature trees along the southern boundary of the site. These are protected by the conservation area, and they are to be retained, and we recommended a condition to ensure that these are protected in accordance with the tree protection plan submitted. This better shows the relationship with 3 chimneys, the neighbouring property to the east. The dwelling would be set in approximately 3 metres from the existing fence and hedge, and this is proposed to be retained. In terms of overlooking or loss of privacy, only a first floor ensuite window is proposed to the dwelling, and a condition has been recommended to ensure that this is obscure glazed in the interest of protecting privacy. And lastly, this is the view of the site looking north. Here you can see the side elevation of the existing garage and workshop, which has an extant permission for a change of use to a dwelling. The sites would have a boundary fence between the two. As set out in the report, it's not considered that there would be any harmful neighbour amenity impacts should that permission be implemented. So as set out at the end of the report, it's considered that the development complies with national and local planning policy. It's recommended that the planning permission is granted subject to the inclusion of the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have one speaker who is Councillor April Stone from Alconbury Western Parish Council. Hello, Councillor Stone. You have
Hello, good evening.
You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chairman and assembled company. It should be noted when this application first came before the Parish Council at a meeting on the 1st of August 2022, it was well attended by members of the parish who were concerned in respect to the issue of flooding in the village because they felt this was being worsened by the amount of current development currently being proposed in the village. And at this meeting, there were a total of 31 parishioners who were recording their objections. For Alconbury Western, this is a significant response to a planning application for a single property. The following reasons were given by the parish council in their objection, and that was the design, access and heritage statement supporting this application for development within the conservation area was not of sufficient quality to be able to analyse the planning application. We therefore had concerns with the design and specification. The design, heritage and access statement concluded the proposal will have no additional impact on the existing character of the conservation area because of its situation, etc. However, there's been no analysis nor evidence offered from which this conclusion has been drawn. We note that the planning officer has subsequently obtained an assessment from a conservation officer saying that this development is acceptable. Would it not be possible for planning office to share such analysis to the parish councils once it's been obtained? Secondly, the application indicates that soakaways will be used, a solution that is not recommended by the Alconbury Brook Flood Group for new properties, who recommends sustainable drainage solutions advice, which is supported by Alconbury Western Parish Council. We would expect this application to address surface water runoff with a positive proposal to this issue. The justification for accepting the change in flood risk to the community was that 2 other developments have been approved in the local area. One of these developments that we're referred to is using a sustainable drainage solution, while this development is proposing to use soakaways, for which we find the comparison to be invalid. The other development is on the same site as this application and was for a change of use of a building, so again was invalid. We note that the report to the DMC recommends conditions that state details of surface water and foul water drainage and flood mitigation measures in accordance with the FRA are recommended. We have already requested that the conditions are more specific and require a sustainable drainage solution to be provided. Thirdly, the property would be the 5th property on this site, all of which share a single narrow driveway access to the high street, which is owned and lived in by the applicant. It's surrounded by a high wall. 3 refuse bins are left for collection outside a window of a neighbouring property which is in daily use and which affects the amenity of the owners. With the recent approval of Planning 2 application for this site, a 4th bin will be added to this collection in the future. And if this application is approved, a 5th bin will be added to the collection of bins outside 5 High Street. We
Councillor
understand...
Stone, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Stone, sorry to interrupt. You've run out of time. How much longer have you got left?
Oh, well, just a couple of sentences, really. Just that we note that the planning officer hasn't proposed a condition to cover the detailed plans for a waste bin collection area, and that the highways have stated that the entrance road area is not as large as they would expect for development of this size, leading to greater pressure on the placing of the bins. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so I'd like to say thank you, Councillor Stone, for addressing us. Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification to our planning officer? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. It's one which doesn't necessarily concern the planning because it's down to other matters, but do we know the width of the actual entrance? Sorry, I've still got my mic on, just realised.
Sorry, we're just checking if it's stated on the plans. We haven't got the exact dimension on the plans. The application was reviewed by the Highway Authority. It's an existing access that serves 3 dwellings, and they did note, as we've heard, that usually for a shared access it's not quite wide enough. But as it's operated presumably without issues for 3 dwellings, the addition of this dwelling wouldn't give rise to additional highway safety implications.
Yeah, thank you. I'll very quickly flick down because I was trying to work out which paragraph I was looking at. It was on 5.3, which is one which usually ticks my box. And it is actually normally a building control issue, which I understand, but it's just one that needs to be made aware of for building control, so they actually do look at it, because depending on that width, there could be a lengthy issue from access for emergency service vehicles, which you might say can be overcome, of course, but that needs to be dealt with.
Oh, it's just a note. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Chair. Just dealing with the flood risk matters, which the representative from the parish council highlighted. And probably a question I should have put to them direct, but I assume you say it's 7.30 flood risk assessment accompanies the application. I assume the parish would have seen that as part of the application. And the other point is the escape gate. That is, as you said later on, basically that would provide an access if there was a flooding emergency. That would provide a way out for residents should the worst occur.
Sorry, would you mind just repeating the last point?
Sorry, it was just a question about the escape gate, which you mentioned in the report. I don't think you sort of highlighted in your remarks though, but I think you put it very clearly here that would provide by definition an escape should the worst case scenario occur with a flooding risk.
Yeah, that's right. The access itself onto the high street, that's flood zone 2 and 3. The flood risk assessment sets out the level of risk there, and in the event that that access was flooded, pedestrians would be able to escape via the gate to the south, and that is entirely flood zone 1. So,
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I have 2 questions. I'll give them to you one at a time. Section 7.39 is about the impact on trees. And it discusses, as you mentioned, the mature trees are not to be affected, but that the orchard fruit trees and the young oak will have to be removed to accomplish this design. And it's considered that these fruit trees have no public visual amenity value, and therefore the removal is considered to be acceptable. As non-protected trees, is that the measure that's usually used to determine whether an orchard is acceptable for removal or not, whether it's publicly visible or provides a public amenity? Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
So policy LP 31 sort of sets out a step-by-step process that developers should take when it comes to trees, hedges. The first point is always we'd like to see them retained. And then sort of the assessment moves on to what is the value of those trees. Obviously, they do have some value, but we feel that replacement soft landscaping could mitigate the loss of those trees.
My second question is about the final point that the parish councillor made on bins. I'm wondering if there are any conditions or any other solutions we have the power to provide to help mitigate the issue that's been identified, and that's very visible when you're on site.
Yeah, we don't have the powers to sort of enforce where the bins are stored. Obviously, they'll be stored on site and then brought to the access on collection day, which is a situation that's quite common. I did speak with the applicant on the site visit, and there was a suggestion that maybe between the parties an alternative arrangement, sort of what side of the access they're placed. But again, that's a civil matter. It's not really something that we could control.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, with regard to the parish council, with the use of soakaways, which I know the parish council is not very keen on at all as the local member, has the applicant been asked with regard to a sustainable drainage solution for that particular property? Because I think a lot of the residents in that particular area would benefit if it did have that sort of solution, because Auchenbury Western does suffer from flooding back in 2020. That the high street was flooded and you would not have been able to get out of that access. So I think, everything we can possibly do to mitigate flooding, then I think as an authority we should be looking at that. So if we could change it from soakaways to a sustainable drainage solution, that would be better.
Sorry. So the applicant's agent was aware of the concerns raised by neighbours and the parish, and they did come back and confirm they'd be happy to utilise SUDs to dispose of surface water drainage, and we're recommending a condition to secure details of that.
I'm very pleased to hear that. The other point I would just make, and the one that does concern me, is with regard to access for a fire engine up that particular access road, because I just don't see how it would get to the property in case of an emergency, let alone to the other one. So I don't know quite how we can look at that situation going forward. Is there anything we can do? Because it just seems to me that if we do have a fire, apart from, if the fire engine can't get there, then the property is going to burn down, and that could be loss of life. So I don't know what the applicant is thinking on that particular property.
So under planning, we don't have legislation that covers that. It is building regulations, but I've been informed that in the event that a new dwelling can't be accessed by fire appliances, that a sprinkler system would be requested.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
A conservation area question. Section 5.4, you mentioned the proposed development will not further harm the historic rural character or appearance of the conservation area because in this location it is no longer evident. Do you mean that the particular characteristics of the village are no longer evident, or that the visual impact of the building is not evident from the street scene?
So that's the council's conservation officer's comments. The full comments are on public access, and I think what they're referring to there is the existing rural character has been somewhat diminished over time by more modern development, including the houses that are around the application site. So I think that's what that summary is referring to there.
Are there any more questions of clarification for our planning officers? In that case, we will move on to the discussion. Is there anyone that would like to start off the discussion on this particular planning application? Councillor Niche, thank you very much.
I thought I'd wait a bit. It's interesting. I think a lot of the questions of debate probably have come out of clarifications, so I think that's quite useful. And I know that Councillor Gardner was saying was the same point on is we need to make sure, and I know building control always do follow up on those aspects, and they can deal with it. They'd have to ensure that they were sprinkled if there wasn't enough access space or the length was further than that. I do have a concern on flooding. We discussed that. The actual property itself seems to be not in a flooded area, but of course it's how much additional flooding that may cause by having that property there, which again we've discussed through talking about SUDs. And I think it is important, as again Councillor Carter has talked about, is ensuring that it's acceptable solutions and not just like a soakaway, which, you know, if we have an awful lot of rain, then the soakaway itself becomes flooded and does create the issue. Apart from that, and I actually agree with Councillor Denport-Ray as well, that there's a bin issue, but there's a bin issue in a lot of locations, but it doesn't help if the neighbours don't, or if the applicants don't deal with it. Actually, the location, they're going to store it on site, that's fine, but it's actually when it's out for collection and delivery, isn't it? But apart from that, I don't see a great deal to me that would actually stop it, but I will actually listen to what other people have to say, because I actually think most of it has been discussed, the issues that I have. So I'll leave to that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Niche. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the flooding issue has been dealt with, paragraph 7.29 downwards. As we said earlier, a flood risk assessment accompanied the application. That's obviously been acceptable. And 7.35 says subject to appropriate conditions. The proposal is considered to be acceptable on both the flood risk and the surface water, so it does accord with LP5 and LP15. So I can't see any substantial reason why we should decline this application. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. My primary concern about this was the flooding issues, as well as Councillor Sanderson said, and as I think Councillor Gardner very helpfully drew attention to in questions earlier. I think fundamentally what the Parish Council were seeking around reassurance in terms of the flooding mitigation, I think is here, possibly from what was clarified in response to further follow-up via the agent. So I think making sure that we're giving prominence to that and clear language around the precise condition, but I do see that absolutely listed there already. I think is as far as we are able to go on that front. I concur that bins are a concern, but I don't see we've got anything in our power to do beyond urging, without any statutory or other basis at all, that an amicable civil solution is found locally for it. But on that basis, in absence of arguments otherwise from others that we've heard so far, I'm very happy to put a proposal on the table that we accept this application.
Councillor Niche.
I'm happy to second that and confer as well that as long as the conditions on the flooding actually clarify that it's an acceptable, not the soakaway element of it, or obviously it's all acceptable to the lead flood authority. So I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think generally I'm in agreement with much of what's been said, but I do have a particular concern about this fire business in 5.3. If it's all very well talking about sprinkler systems, well, that's only any good if we're talking about solid fires. But you know, if there's gas fire or if there's an oil fire or an electric fire, it's not going to be sufficient. So I do think that going forward, I think this needs to be looked at a bit more seriously than, you know, just posing that as a solution. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, with regard to the recommendations on the flooding issue, I would, instead of it just saying details of surface water and foul water drainage, I would like to improve on that and say a sustainable drainage solution for the property. So, you know, if it's got that caveat put in it, then I would feel a lot happier.
Councillor Wakeford.
Just to say, if officers wish to suggest particular language around that, I would be very happy to amend my proposal to, I trust with Councillor Nish's seconding, I see him nodding, to just reflect that more explicitly. I think the wording we've got listed in our report is, if I'm looking at the right line, details of surface water and foul drainage in section 8. So I concur. We feels safe for officer advice to the contrary that we can be a little more specific around that to provide the reassurance without changing the intended meaning.
Could I invite our chair, our planning, sorry, not chair, our chief of planning to just address this on that particular point?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. We can take away and have a look at a condition. I will just put down the marker in terms of the wording, bearing in mind about if this is going to go to the principle of your decision tonight, bearing in mind that we haven't consulted the LLFA on the precise wording. But we are happy to take that away. What I will ask of you, though, is to present your planning reason as to why you need this condition in relation to this application as we go forward. That is particularly relevant because, again, mindful of after tonight as well, should the panel be minded to support this, obviously it will remain within the applicant's gift to submit a Section 73 application. So it is important, though, not only discussing the condition, but your planning reason for why you feel this goes to the heart of the principle and therefore must be appended.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, my planning reason is the fact that it's a flooding issue within the village of Alconbury. It has suffered extensively in 2020. You know, so we want to try and make sure that flooding is mitigated throughout, you know, where we can, flooding should be mitigated. And I think by going down the route of sustainable drainage solutions, that will assist or help prevent flooding in the future.
I'll just bring in our planning officer.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. It would be helpful if you give me reference to the planning policy in our local plan that you're having regard to. As I say, we can take away the principle of, but we must be mindful to not look to create new policy through individual planning applications.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I would like us to consider more thorough wording in this condition based on our policies LP5 and LP15 of the local plan that relate to flood risk and specifically surface water risk in this case. If the site does not have sufficient surface water attenuation, then that will affect the flood risk 2 and flood risk 3 zones that are directly downstream from where surface water would flow to. And so I would encourage some more specific wording on that condition.
Thank you. Yes, we're happy to take that away. My question to the panel is, are you happy to delegate the final wording of that condition to officers?
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think I saw some nodding around the table. I'm very happy to say yes in response to that specific question. Looking at Councillor Nish nodding, who was seconding, and I would take reassurance that the reference to SUDS is in 7.34 of the report as being reported as the intention from the agent already. So I'm hoping this is, as I indicated earlier, a matter of clarity with respect to what is in practice already intended, as opposed to substantively seeking to condition some difference that will cause a concern to the applicant.
Okay, so in this particular case, Councillor Niche has seconded, Councillor Wakeford has proposed that we approve with a condition that has been worded by our officers regarding flooding. Regarding sustainable drainage. Okay, all those that are in favour.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
And those against? Those abstentions?
That's 1.
In that case, that has been approved. Thank you very much. We will move on to item 3B on our agenda. And I'll invite our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, to present a planning application in Sawtrey.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the application site is 20 Green End Road, Sawtrey. This application is referred to committee because the officer recommendation is contrary to the parish council recommendation of refusal. So on the screen in front of you, you can see the site outlined in black with shading. The site is located within the built-up area of Sawtrey. The site is located on the western side of Green End Road in the mainly residential area with a fire station immediately adjacent to the south. The site is bound by residential properties to the north and west and on the opposite side of the road to the east. The conservation area is immediately to the north, separated by a property. This is an aerial image of the site. As you can see, there's existing building on the site for area to the rear and then also parking to the front. And you can see the fire station immediately to the south. So this application seeks approval for the change of use of 20 Green End Road from a coffee shop / bakery, previously use class A3, now use class EB, to a fish and chip shop and a restaurant / takeaway, mixed use development, therefore sui generis. The proposal also seeks planning permission for the erection of a rear extension, front veranda, and installation of a replacement extraction system / flue. This application is retrospective, as most of the works have been completed. This application was submitted following a planning enforcement inquiry. So you've got the image in front of you, which is the front of the application site. And you can see a parking area at the front. And then you've also got some seating area just underneath that front veranda. Just run through the plans. So that's another photo of the site. That's a photo of the police station immediately to the south. You can see the double yellow lines on the opposite side of the road and also restrictions outside the fire station to ensure that access is maintained at all times. This is the proposed site plan. So you can see the rear extension on the top left shaded. You can see the front veranda also shaded. And you can see the car parking spaces on there as well. This is the existing and proposed ground floor plan. So top right, so on the right hand side is proposed, and at the top of that you can see the rear extension, and then also at the bottom you can see the front veranda with the seating area outside immediately under. These are the existing and proposed elevations, so you can see minimal changes. And that's the existing and proposed roof plan. So as mentioned before, the application is referred to the committee because the officer recommendation is contrary to the parish council recommendation of refusal. They recommend the application be refused on highway grounds. They also note the omission of a larger extraction system and chimney within the application that's not been installed, and the covered veranda and seating area at the front of the premises, which has not been applied for. They also wanted to draw attention to a previous condition, which was the plan permission for the bakery, which restricted seating outside. And as you can see on the proposed plans and from the image, there is now seating outside underneath the front veranda. So this application seeks to regulise those works. The main issues are noise, odour and parking. So as outlined before, there's 2 off-street car parking spaces provided at the front of the site. During the course of the application, double yellow lines have been painted on the road under a traffic regulation order outside the site to prevent the possibility of cars parking in unsafe locations. The highway team at Cambridge County Council support the application. Also, during the application, additional information regarding noise and odour, including proposed mitigation works, have been submitted to the council. The environmental health team now support the application. Members should note that there's a 21-day consultation currently underway due to the amendment of the description to include the front veranda and replacement extraction system / flue. This is because the plans show both these works, both the veranda and the flue, and the applicant is applying for plan permission for these. The officer recommendations approval, subject to the outcome of the 21-day public consultation, to delegate the authority of the final decision to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair, and subject to the conditions to include the following: drawings, parking to be provided and retained, submission of cycle storage details, noise mitigation compliance, odour mitigation compliance, signage and lighting at the front not granted plan permission, and hours of operation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers for this particular planning application. The first speaker is Councillor Dick Tuplin. So I'd like to invite Councillor Dick Tuplin.
Thank you.
Lovely. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'll be as brief as possible. Our big objection to this is the parking issue. The yellow lines on the opposite side of the road have recently been installed, but it is impossible for the police to enforce them. And anybody most planning applications, when you see the council object to them because of what might happen, here you can see it happening all the time. The property is on a bend, so from whichever direction drivers are approaching the site, not to visit the site, but to get through, you can't see round the corner. So people meet on the wrong side of the road. And this goes on now daily. It is every time the chip shop is open, people park on the yellow lines, even though they haven't been there very long. And it is just an impossible situation. Somebody has to reverse somewhere. You've seen photographs submitted to the application from objectors with cars parked in other people's driveways, even to the entrance to the fire station next door. 2 parking spaces is not enough for a 30-plus seater restaurant. the nearest parking is on Greenways, the shopping centre, but that's private. It's really for the shops on Greenways, and there's already 2 takeaways on there. The other parking is at Greystones Public House, and they've had so many problems with parking there that they've had to get Parking Eye to install a parking meter on their situation to control it. So there just isn't anywhere to park. That is our big problem. Other issues have been dealt with in the report, and we can accept all of that, but we can't accept the parking situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Saunderson.
Good evening, Dick. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I just have to take you up on your objection, though. 7.26 of the report does say County Council Highways Authority originally raised objections to the proposals in terms of inadequate off-street car parking provision. But it says following the implementation of a traffic regulation order along Green End Road to include the W lines, they're now satisfied that the proposal would not result in any detrimental impact. So I'm not sure on what grounds you think we can support your parish council's objection.
If you were to go down there any evening, they're not open tonight, but if you went down any other evening, you'll find that people don't take any notice of the yellow lines. There's nowhere else to go.
But that's a police matter, isn't it? Not really a matter
Yes,
for us as a planning
but they've got
authority.
other things to deal with.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? No, thank you very much for joining us, Councillor
Thank you.
Toplin. And our next speaker for this particular application is Mr. Steve Millward. Welcome. And when you're ready, if you just press the middle button, if you just move to the chair at the top, yes, please. And then you'll be able to see the timer as well. So when you're ready, if you press the middle button and then the microphone will light up.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here on behalf of a number of the residents in the area. From the day that the changes at this property were started, when we saw a timber frame structure being built on footings that were still wet, having only been poured that morning, we knew we were in for some problems. The issues around the smells, the traffic congestion, the fire station blocked access, the noise and the litter are all well documented and continue to this day. What is not well understood is the secondary problems such as the abuse that several residents have endured from customers when they've been challenged about parking across people's driveways or parking on the newly installed double yellow lines. A major concern for us is also the blocking of pavements, forcing mothers with prams and wheelchair users into the middle of the road to pass, and we see this on a regular basis. The owners of this development, unfortunately, have on many occasions shown utter contempt for the planning process and the regulations that they are supposed to follow, and they continue to do so to this day. For example, despite the latest application stating that they should close at 6 p.m. on Sundays, they are always open well beyond this. What has been done to date bears no resemblance whatsoever to what was on the various plans that have been submitted. We have lost count of the number of times the owners have promised to fix the smells and the noise, but we are still faced with these today on a daily basis. As a result, we have no confidence whatsoever that any conditions that you set will be complied with in the long term. As the councillor just mentioned, the recent installation of the double yellow lines on the eastern side of the road has been a complete disaster, with most clients completely ignoring them because, as has been said, we've got no traffic wards and no police officers. These yellow lines have already been directly responsible for one accident on the road, and there will be more to come. Of further concern is the growing housing development on Gidding Road. Here we have 350 houses currently being built, and as a result, the major routes in and out of the village will become busier, and the parking issues outside of this establishment are inevitably going to cause further problems. We genuinely believe that the implications of these developments have not been factored into this planning application. We're also extremely concerned at the latest developments of the property with new signage already being installed. With the owner being a shrewd and prudent businessman, he would not be spending money unless he had some guarantees that he would get his planning permission. So is this already a done deal? So where does this leave us, the residents of the area? We're at a loss to understand why this development has been allowed to continue unchallenged for so long. We're at a loss to know why the council hasn't acted to reduce the traffic chaos. So can I please end by asking you a simple question? Would you be happy to have this establishment next door to you? If, as I suspect, the answer is no, then please offer us the same consideration and reject this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm quite unhappy to hear the supposition that perhaps this decision may already have been decided. That's why it's before us here today to make a decision here. And so I've just offered you the opportunity to explain more on that statement.
It's simply a matter of, say, literally over this last few days, there has been numerous changes made at the property. So there's new signage that has gone up at the front. I believe there is some works being done on the roof. So, I mean, I know the owner quite well by now, having argued and remonstrated with him on numerous occasions over the last 4 or 5 years. So we as residents wonder why he has started doing that now rather than waiting until you have all made a decision on the planning application, that's all.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? Okay, so thank you, Mr. Millwood, for addressing us. Are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that last point about the change of signage, I've visited the site with Councillor McAdam on Friday, and the signage seems very different from what we saw in the photo. So that does appear to have taken place. But I just wanted to ask a question about 7.38. The signage and the lighting is actually not part of this application, so would we be looking for a further application to clarify that matter?
Through you, Chair. So yes, in regards to the signage and lighting, that is not part of the application. So we've put a condition on for the avoidance of doubts. My photo was taken about 2.5 weeks ago. I didn't go out last week, so I'm unsure of what changes there are. But I think this clear point here is it's not part of the application being considered tonight. So they would have to seek plan permission for those works. Likewise, if those works are taking place, then that's an enforcement issue.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
We've talked about the veranda a bit. I just want to make sure that application before us now does include the veranda, and that if we're minded to approve it, we are granting a new, we're regularizing outdoor seating, newly different than the previous application for what was on site.
Through you, Chair. So yes, the veranda is part of the application. Previously, so as heard from the speakers and on the parish council comments, previous conditions haven't been complied with in terms of outdoor seating, which has led to the submission of this application to seek to regularise the works. It's worth just touching on that the environmental health team have been consulted as part of the application, and they've considered the potential noise impacts of that seating area. And they support the application, subject to a condition regarding noise mitigation.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you just bring that picture up again, which showed the front bit. It's just a clarification on the number of parking spaces, because I've heard 2 and I've heard 3. In the plan here, it says 3, and I'm trying to think, is it 2 or 3? And I can't quite recollect with that picture. Having said that, as you say, it's 10 days old, so they could be completely different today.
Sorry, through you, Chair. So in terms of that front of site, it's 2 car parking spaces. I think what was referring to is maybe the error on the plan there, that 2 looks like a 3, but it's definitely 2 car parking spaces. You can see there that 3 would be a tight squeeze.
Yeah, thank you for that, 'cause I thought you'd struggle to get a third one in because there's a planter there next to the entrance to the fire station, which probably assists the fire station, because I know that was consistently blocked in the past. But
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
In your recommendations in section 8, you mentioned that the 21-day public consultation is still open. And so if we're minded to approve, we would need to delegate the authority of the final decision. What outcomes of that consultation would trigger that type of delegation? What response would need to be received in order for our decision to be overruled?
So, through you, Chair, there would be no overruling of your decision. So, whatever the resolution of committee is tonight, we need to wait until the outcome of that public consultation. If during the public consultation new material planning consideration is raised, so that means that something that hasn't been raised before by a neighbour or objector, or the parish council, or something that hasn't been addressed in the report, therefore the application would need to come back to committee so you could consider that new material consideration raised. But no, there's no overruling of your decision. So the word in there that say we do get a neighbour comment come in, but it raises concerns that have already been recorded in the report and discussed here tonight, that we would then discuss with Chair the content of those comments, and then the decision would be made on whether it needs to come back to committee.
Are there any more questions of clarification? Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask about the timing of this? So this was registered in February 2020, and then the parish council replied in April 21. So there's quite a big gap there, or over a year. Is that normal? I thought parishes had a set time to respond.
Through you, Chair. So this is one of the backlog applications. I recently took this on to finish the committee report. In terms of kind of the process, no, it's not normal. There's been amendments on this. There's been a change of case officer. This application is slightly different because it's retrospective as well. So it's making sure all the proposed works or works that have been completed are part of the application. I do note that potentially some of the comments from the parish council predate some of the additional information. But as part of the 21-day consultation, the parish council will have an opportunity to comment further if they wish.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. We've touched on this already with one of the speakers, and I dare say may come up in debate, but I just wondered if we might give officers an opportunity to add anything on the parking issue if they felt able, specifically in absence of, as Councillor Sanderson drew attention to earlier, in absence of specific concern or advice from the Highways Authority. Is there any basis in the report you set out to us for us to base any concern around parking and highway safety?
Through you, Chair. So in regards to parking, there's 2 parts to this. So the local planning authority is the parking authority. So we set standards through the local plan. In this case, there are no standards for this use. So our starting point is policy. The Highway Authority, which Cambridge County Council, assess the highway safety impacts. Of course, parking and highway safety go hand in hand. If there's parking on a bend, for example, like here, then it can lead to highway safety concerns. So starting point policy, there is no standards for parking. So we have to look at the existing lawful use, which is the cafe and bakery, opening hours, the comings and goings. Looking at that as a whole, as well as the highway authority's comments which support the application following the traffic regulation order, officers have concluded that the parking is acceptable in this case. We note concerns raised by the speakers about people ignoring the double yellow lines, driving on parking across people's driveways. We have no control over that. As part of this application, we just have to ensure that we've gone as far as we can within kind of our remits. In this case, the applicant has done a traffic regulation order, so they've put something in place as far as they can in terms of restricting parking on that bend. The fire station, again, access should be maintained at all times, and parking across driveways is a matter for police. So in terms of what we can control here is the parking standards and the highway safety element. Highway safety has been ticked off by the highways team, noting obviously the concerns, but as far as we can go, we consider that parking has been addressed.
Very clear exposition. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I just want to check my understanding. So in Huntingdonshire's local plan, there isn't a clear distinction of how many parking places there ought to be, but your take on this is the building that was already approved and that already existed had 2 parking spaces, and this building has 2 parking spaces, and therefore it does meet the conditions of our local plan. Have I concluded that correctly?
For you, Chair. So it's the weighing up of all the factors and considerations. So in this case, it's a change of use. So we have a starting point, which is the existing lawful use. We have the proposed use. Both uses are quite similar. One is for a cafe, the other is for a restaurant takeaway, similar footfall. There's no increase proposed in terms of seating area. Noting obviously there is some additional seating outside the front veranda, but it's only a couple of tables, it's not significant. So because this is a change of use, we do have a material consideration, which is the lawful use. It's consideration of all of these factors together, which has led us to this recommendation, as well as the highway comments supporting the application.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions of clarification, we'll move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Thank you, Councillor Sampson.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was a very good explanation just now by Lewis. I think it really sums up this application. I have a certain amount of sympathy with the parish council and the neighbours. I understand that they've had issues with the owners. You know, everyone wants to get along, don't they? And I understand the parking could be very difficult around there at peak times, but that's obviously not a matter that we can get involved with directly. That would be a matter for the police or hopefully when civil parking enforcement comes, which we're working on. That's a slightly separate matter, but I think that there's no substantial reasons to decline this application, so I'm happy to propose approval. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this particular planning? Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm going along with Tom, really. I'm trying to balance up, you know, the benefits against the harm that's created, and I appreciate there is harm created there, especially for the residents that are quite close by. But it is a benefit. Obviously, fish and chips is an old traditional food that we've had in this country for many years, and
the fact that probably with no other access to it, it means people are going to have to travel probably to Yaxley, which is quite a few mile away, the same as the people from Stilton do. So I just feel that the benefit outweighs the harm on this one. So I'd like to go along with the officer's recommendation, and I'll happily second Tom's recommendation, if you'll take that.
I will. Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think this is a difficult one. I just wanted to draw particular attention to and just reflect on some of the concerns that we've heard set out to us on behalf of the residents and the parish council. Excuse me. I think the point was put to us. If we were uncomfortable with this next door to us, then we're invited to decline it. I think appreciate that was intended rhetorically, but so those watching here and beyond, in their great number, I'm sure, are clear. The legal framework within which we work doesn't accord us the ability to make the subjective judgment about that, and I dare say every single one of us on this committee has felt obliged to vote in favour of things that we dislike personally in a variety of ways or have concerns about. That's not what we're here to judge. We're considering in terms of the planning policies and rules in front of us. I think as officers very helpfully set out, though there is clearly scepticism based in the reality of what is happening in practice as to the assurances on highway safety, I think we have no alternative but to defer to the competent authority, county council's advice on that. That's in the report here. I think the judgment which was put explanation put very clearly the distinction between highway safety and parking does allow a judgment as to the acceptability of parking, but given the current parking situation with the previous existing business and the lack of clear basis in our policies for any different number of parking spaces, I don't see that we could make fly a refusal on that basis, as much as it's tempting to try to do in line with resident concerns. So I think the history on the site clearly of enforcement concerns and retrospective elements to planning applications are not things that we are here to condone, but as people will appreciate, we are not able to take account of that sort of for or against the application. We're considering it on its merits. So for all those reasons, I sympathise enormously with the concerns we've heard articulated, but I don't see we have any defensible alternative but to run with the proposal that we've got on the table, already seconded, so I don't need to.
Councillor Devonport-Ray.
Yeah, on a very similar topic. So I think Councillor Wakeford is right that highway safety, we have to listen to the recommendations of which are included in the report. However, I do think our council is responsible for parking provision. And in my opinion, the change of use from a cafe and a bakery to a restaurant does create higher parking provision necessary than the previous bakery and cafe. So from my point of view, that material planning consideration isn't met. LP 17, I don't believe, is met. However, when you take all of the arguments that the officers clearly outlined in the report that we have to weigh up against each other, all of the material considerations, I think that that lack of parking is outweighed by all of the other planning considerations that we have to consider. And so I will be supporting the recommendation.
Councillor Niche.
Just briefly, I'm listening to the debate that's going on, and I think clearly the officer has clarified a number of issues, because the parking is a concern. But of course, if we were looking at this, had it been a brand new application, nothing there, we look at it probably quite differently. The fact has already been alluded to. It's something that's already there. It makes it extremely difficult for me, and I'm sure the rest of us, to see any way where we could actually actively refuse it. So I will be supporting it, but I just hope and ask that specifically, as we've heard, the potentially is already other enforcement issues going on, that we do keep on top of it and keep the parish council involved and in the knowledge of what's actually happening. And I think that's the best we can do from a planning perspective, is just ensure that we clarify those conditions that are in there and make sure that they are enforced, and keep it on with the police as well. Until such times as we take over civil parking enforcement, it is still a police matter for all parking issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we have a proposal of approval from Councillor Sanderson and seconded by Councillor Butler, we will go for approval for this particular application. All those that are for approval, please can you raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's unanimous.
So that planning application has been approved. Moving on to item 3C. We have a planning application in St Ives, and our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, will be presenting that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is the Church Hall on Ramsey Road in St Ives. This application is referred to committee because the officer recommendation is contrary to the Parish Council recommendation of approval. Members should note there is an update report for this item, which will be referred to later in this presentation, given its implications on the officer recommendation. So the application site is outlined in black with the hash. The site is located within St Ives Conservation Area. The site is also within close proximity to one Grade 1 listed building, which is St Ives Parish Church, and two Grade 2 listed buildings, which is the Old Grammar School, 1 Ramsey Road, and Angler's Rest Hotel, Ramsey Road. The site is located within Flood Zone 2, with a small section in the southwest corner within Flood Zone 3. So that is an aerial image of the site on the screen. So you can see on the right hand side there is some area to the rear of the property, and you can see there's some area to the front of the property, and the building itself is an L shape. That is a photo of the front of the site taken from Ramsey Roads. So the application seeks approval for the conversion of the existing buildings, an existing church parish hall, former schoolhouse, into 4 residential units. The proposal involves various internal and external alterations, including the replacement of external doors, as well as the insertion of new external doors. The 4 residential units would consist of Unit 1, which is a 2-bed, Unit 2, which is a 1-bed, Unit 3, which is a 1-bed, and Unit 4, which is a 2-bed. So you've got the proposed site plan / floor plans in front of you. Apologies, it's one plan, so I haven't broken it up. So I'll just go, if you just look at my mouse on the screen, I'll just move through it. So this is an external amenity area for Unit 1 here. Got an external amenity unit area for Unit 4, with access to another area back here. And then down the side, oh, I've lost the mouse. Where's it gone? And then side of the building just here, access down to Units 2 and 3, with amenity areas to the rear. St Ives Town Council recommend approval, support the application as it would see a disused building being brought back into use. They make various other recommendations which are in the report. As referred to earlier, there is an, oh sorry, let me just finish going through proposed plans. So these are proposed elevations, minor works, just including insertion of external doors. So, as referred to earlier, there is an update report for this item. The applicant submitted additional information to address LP22, which relates to local services and community facilities. So, policy LP22 outlines that local services and community facilities include, but are not limited to, shops, public houses, places of worship, cemeteries, health centres, libraries, fuel filling stations, and public halls. Policy LP22 states, where permitted development rights do not apply, a proposal which involves the loss of a local service or community facility will only be supported where equivalent service or community facility will be provided in a location with an equal or better level of accessibility for the community it's intended to serve, or it demonstrates there is no reasonable prospect of that service or facility being retained or restored because either there is insufficient community support for its continuation, or reasonable steps are being taken to effectively market the property for its current use without success. So it should be noted that LP22 covers a wide range of different local services and community facilities. Members should note that evidence base will vary from case to case. Each case/use should be assessed on its own merits. For example, fuel filling stations are very different from public houses. Public houses are very different from a public or community facility. So in this particular case, the community facility relies on a booking system. Customers would book the facility ahead of time. It's not a place where you can just turn up to use the facilities. Therefore, the applicant can quantify the demand for the service. The above information contained in the update report demonstrates that there's insufficient community support for its continuation given the lack of bookings over the last few years. The information also demonstrates that there are multiple alternative community facilities in close proximity to the site, which has better levels of accessibility for the community it's intended to serve. It also clearly outlines the amount of repair and refurbishment that's required to bring the building up to standards. Officers note that the property has not been marketed. However, the policy clearly states that either EI or E2 must be addressed. In this particular case, when considering the information submitted against particular use of the site, officers are satisfied that EI has been addressed and therefore do not seek marketing information. It is the view of officers that submitted information is sufficient in order to address the loss of the community facility and the requirements of policy LP22. Officers therefore withdraw the first reason for refusal, which related to principal development. Given that there's been objections on the basis of the principal development, a 14-day consultation on this submitted information is currently being carried out to allow comments on this. Notwithstanding the resolution of Planning Committee, if material consideration is raised from the 14-day consultation, Chair and Vice Chair will be consulted and it will be considered whether the application would need to come back to committee. So the recommendation is minded to refuse for the following reasons and the outcome of the public consultation, and to delegate the authority of the final decision to Chief Planner in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair. So reason one relates to visual impacts. So the proposal includes the erection of a 2-metre high timber fence, which is just where the mouse is now, separating the two external amenity areas. The proposal also includes the siting of 4 separate bin stores, which is a bin store for each residential unit proposed in the front of the site. So you can see where the mouse is now, 2 of them proposed on the right-hand side, and then 1 proposed either side of the 2-metre fence. The conservation team have objected to the proposal on the grounds that the proposed 2-metre fence and 4 bin stores would break up the open character of the front of the site. Therefore, Reason 1, the proposed layout of the front part of the site, including a proposed 2-metre fence and the 4 bin stalls, would break up the openness of the front of the site to its visual detriment. The proposed development would fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the St Ives Conservation Area, will result in detrimental visual impacts upon the character and appearance of the street scene and surrounding area. Reason 2 relates to overlooking. It's quite difficult to get a photo on site which demonstrated this. I've put together a number of plans so this is clear. So on the left-hand side, where this red circle is, a window is about here, and it looks towards number 10, 12 and 14 River Place. On this drawing to the right, you can see where the window is, and looking onto the rear gardens and rear elevation of the properties mentioned. The top right one is a section through, and the bottom one is the window in question. So the proposed first floor bedroom window on the south facing elevation, serving unit 3, would significantly overlook the rear amenity areas of numbers 10, 12 and 14 River Place, would therefore have an adverse impact upon the residential amenity. Reason 3 relates to overdevelopment. Within the report, there's also a section assessing the internal amenity of the proposed units, including the external amenity areas as well. Officers considered that the proposal fails to respect surrounding heritage assets, provides poor residential amenity standards for residents, and would result in significant adverse impact on residential amenity of neighbouring properties. It's considered that the proposal constitutes an overdevelopment of the site. That's the reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For this particular planning application, we have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Councillor Nick Wells from St Ives Town Council. Welcome. And when you're ready, please start.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. As Chair says, I'm representing in this case St Ives Town Council, of which I am Chair of the Planning Committee. The Town Council Planning Committee met on the 24th of March 2021, and at that point recommended approval of the development, noting a few aspects which felt might be a concern. Before saying that, the fundamental principle of the returning to use of a building which is effectively disused is welcomed. Obviously, the town is keen to see a building like this in use rather than in a state of disuse. Some suggested conditions were mentioned, including, and bearing in mind this is 2 years ago, a solid fence preferable to the chain link fence, which was then proposed on the south side between the site and the adjacent housing. Recommended the use of obscure glazing on the upper level windows to prevent overlooking of River Place. Suggested seeking confirmation of landscaping details and wishing to see a permeable surface allowing water drainage. Details of the external lighting requested, which should not create any light pollution. And finally, wanting to see native planting and insect-friendly plants. That's a submission of the Town Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Given that the conclusions that you've spoken to us about were from a year and a half ago, is there anything that you would add to them looking at the application that's before us now that we need to decide tonight?
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. It's a good question. Don't think there's anything of great significance. I mean, obviously there are, as I mentioned previously, concerns around the overlooking of River Place, albeit that this building is a lot older than River Place, and River Place has developed. But nevertheless, obviously the River Place has developed on the understanding that they wouldn't be overlooking from the neighbouring property. I would say that this particular corner of the conservation area is has seen significant change over the years, not least the replacement of the former aviator pub, which then became the Merchant House, is now a private residential development. So that was obviously a permitted change to a building directly opposite the church hall, which substantially altered the nature of this particular corner of the conservation area. But the minor concerns that we had, as I mentioned, otherwise would still stand. Thank you.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, it's just I noted one of your concerns were the overlooking, which I'm assuming we are talking about the same window that was put up earlier. But of course, the application in front of you wasn't for opaque. So, if it was to be an unopaque, in other words, a clear window, I suppose I'm asking the question, which I shouldn't really ask, is your view from that perspective, from a refusal perspective of overlooking. Just wondering what your views were from a town council's perspective on that.
Thank you, Councillor. We probably should have made a little bit clearer than they did as the planning committee as to what our view was on the upper level windows, but we were very clear that there would need to be obscure glazing, so there would need to be glazing which prevented overlooking, such that the residents of River Place would be affected by it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification for this particular speaker? No more questions, so thank you very much, Councillor Wells. For this particular application, we have the agent speaking on behalf of our applicant. Mr. Collier is coming to speak to us. Welcome. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and you press the middle button.
Thank you, Chair. I ought to clarify I'm not the agent. I'm actually one of the church wardens of St Ives Parish Church. A bit of background. The church acquired this site about 60 years ago. Our main centre of operations, of course, is the parish church, which we acquired a little over 1,000 years ago. We've made a strategic decision to concentrate our activities in the church building. The present hall was refurbished about 25 or so years ago. That refurbishment didn't deal with the fundamental structural problems which arise from the use of modern concrete tiles on the pre-existing timber structure, and has led to the cracking, which is referred to, I think, in your addendum report. The maintenance of the hall would require at least a 6-figure sum simply to address the structural problems, quite apart from updating the lavatory and catering facilities. We don't see that as a sensible use of our resources, particularly bearing in mind the now limited demand for this kind of community facility. Put shortly, there's no future for this building as a community facility. It is in the nature of a toxic asset. So far as the church is concerned, we have a number of developments which we urgently need to address. We require lavatory facilities and light catering facilities within the church building. We require proper access for people with disabilities. We require flexibility to allow use of small spaces with children and to make better use of the church as a community facility. These options, these factors are no longer optional. It may have been acceptable even 40 years ago to traipse down Church Walk and across Ramsey Road to go to the lavatory, or to take small children to a Sunday school. It isn't acceptable anymore. As it's a Grade 1 listed building, and as of course it's subject to the faculty jurisdiction, to make those kind of modifications will be challenging. And challenging is usually a euphemism for expensive. And obviously, whilst there are grants available and scope for fundraising, it's important from our point of view to have a solid capital base on which to develop. And we see this development as an appropriate use of our resources to ensure that we can carry on with our primary objective. A couple of observations, if I may, on the latest report from your officers. Obviously, we welcome the acceptance that the principle of development is no longer objected to. We believe that the concerns about visual impact and overlooking have been addressed by our latest drawing. Officers have said that they don't overcome all the harm identified. It's not quite clear in what way they fail to overcome all the harm identified. And certainly we're very open to the possibility of grants being made subject to condition. There would be no objection to conditions relating to bins, and indeed no objection to conditions being made limiting permitted development in the future.
Mr. Collier, have you almost finished?
I have almost finished.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Very quickly, thank you.
The conclusion of overdevelopment in 7.63 appears to be contingent upon the preceding objections, and we say they're met, and the conclusion of overdevelopment is no longer a valid one. We see this as an appropriate development subject to conditions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor? Right, okay. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you for that. My question is actually to do with a representation that's just come up about the use of the hall being currently used as a food bank. What does the parish church sort of propose you would do as an alternative for this food bank as its current use? Because, yeah, thank you.
So I'm grateful for that question. Already, the food bank operation has outgrown the parish hall, and certainly we would envisage in any event wishing to move that operation to another site, particularly one that has better access. One of the problems with this site is that there's very limited parking on the west side of Ramsey Road. There's no parking during daytime, a rule I have to say more honoured in the breach of the observance. And on the east side of Ramsey Road, there's a cycle lane. And so it's not an ideal site for us in any event. And our operation as a food bank is now so large, we would be wanting to move anyway. So if I can answer it in this way, Chair, we have already got ideas as to where we would move. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. Yes, you used the phrase grade 1 listed, although our conservation officer has described it as an undesignated heritage asset. Can I just check that that is your understanding as well?
My understanding is that the church building is grade 1 listed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification for this particular speaker? Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. You talk about parking. What is the parking for the 6 bedrooms that you're proposing?
There is public parking available nearby, in the Globe Place car park in particular. Certainly so far as your report is concerned, that wasn't identified as a difficulty. There is no additional parking on the site.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no more questions, so thank you for addressing us. We'll move on to questions of clarification for our officer, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it's with regard to the late reps, and one of your reasons for refusal was with regard to the 2-metre high fence at the front of the property. It states in the late reps that 2-metre fence has been removed. from the latest plans. So I just wanted a clarification on that, because it says members should note that the revised drawings were also sent to officers which showed the removal of the front 2-metre fence, which is one of your reasons for refusal.
Through you, Chair. So the next sentence says officers have not accepted these drawings for consideration, given that they do not overcome all the harm identified on the update report. So yeah, I'll just expand on that. So alongside the additional information regarding the principal development, amended drawings were also sent. These drawings showed the removal of a 2-metre fence and the proposed obscure glazing on the first floor bedroom window on the south-facing elevation serving Unit 3. Officers did not accept these drawings because they did not overcome all the harm identified. So if I just refer you back to my officer report. So if we look at section amenity for future occupiers, it's paragraph 7.39 to 7.41. So this outlines external amenity area and also internal amenity for the future occupiers. So when looking at so if we just take the fence, for example, so proposed 2-metre fence, the amended drawings that were sent to us proposed to remove that and just have it open at the front. However, the plan still showed the separation of amenity areas at the rear, which still led to the issue of where the bin stores are going to go because there's not access to the middle one. So if I just go to plans, so I'm trying to explain this in words, just bear with me 1 second. I'll just pull up the presentation and go back to plans and make more sense. So, sorry again, this is a bit squeezed on the screen. So, what I'm referring to at the front is the 2-metre fence here. The amended drawings that were sent to us propose to remove this fence. So then that resolved the issue regarding the 2-metre fence at the front breaking up. Bin stores were still proposed at the front, and you can see at the rear again, these were still allocated as amenity areas for the units. This created further issues around the amenity of future occupiers because of the quality of this. So, for example, this amenity area here where the mouse is currently on, access to that amenity area is only through the unit itself. Therefore, bins and cycles can't be stored in that area, otherwise it'd have to be taken through the house. So we didn't accept the plans because they did not overcome all the harm. Because this is a conversion, yes, we do give some leeway to proposals, but we still have to be satisfied that the site can accommodate the level of development proposed. In this case, which leads to the last reason for refusal overdevelopment, we're not satisfied. There's multiple reasons within that reason for overdevelopment, such as the impact, the visual impact, the overlooking, and the amenity for future occupiers, external and internal. Sorry, was there more to that question? I kind of went on for a bit on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. So, in your recommendation for refusal, you're saying the proposal is contrary to policy LP22 and doesn't justify the loss of the community facility. What I'm wondering in the context of the area is, has there been any other land earmarked for a community facility? And does the loss of this particular area, I mean, this particular proposal, can it be, is there still opportunity for it to become a community facility? Yeah, basically, that is there the loss justified, basically?
For you, Chair. So I'll just refer you to my update report, which removes the reason for refusal against the principal development. But just to highlight, so on the update report, there's details of local venues in the immediate vicinity within 800 metres. There's 6 potential venues, and most of these have ample parking, better facilities, level access. So officers have considered that the applicant has provided enough information to justify the loss. Just to go back, obviously I don't want to go through it all again, but I can do. In terms of LP22, we looked at, so I'm just scrolling down, bear with me. So the policy clearly says that either EI or E2 needs to be addressed. So we haven't accepted marketing information or whether somebody else could, we've accepted the fact that no marketing information has been provided on this because it's our view that they have satisfied EI, there's insufficient community support. That's because this use relies on a booking system. Therefore, the applicant can quantify the demands, and they provided information about the limited amount of bookings over the last few years. I hope that answers your question.
Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I've been briefly rushing through again just to see what I've missed on the glazing front, because it said that they proposed glazing, but you've not accepted that. Is that the same window we're talking about? And my recollection, was it a bedroom or not a bedroom? I can't remember now.
For you, Chair. So yes, the plans that they sent us to consider did include obscure glaze in that window, which you could do via condition. We didn't accept those plans, and we considered that condition isn't appropriate in this case. Sorry, just let me bear with me 1 second. I'll just pull up. So this window is located approximately 9.2 metres away from the rear elevation of numbers 6 to 14 River Place. This distance is inadequate. There's a number of other factors. This window serves a bedroom and is the only window for that bedroom. It's the size of the window, so there's a perception of overlooking as well. So in this case, given that there's other harm also identified, a reason for refusal was put forwards. But when it comes to obscure glazing windows with overlooking, it's a case by case. So it's looking at other windows that serve that room, kind of distance away from properties, etc.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it was just clarifying. I was trying to reckon on my own brain as to what actually the usage of that room was. And if it had been a bathroom, it's acceptable in one aspect. But if it's other usage, community usage, usage by family, whatever, then it's actually a bit awkward to have obscure glazing in the high. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 5.6, the conservation team have been quite clear in their objections to this. But they say later on, well, the conservation officer says, I'm concerned that the future permitted development rights could seriously degrade the character and appearance of the building, and says the permitted development rights are withdrawn. So my first question is that actually part of this application? I don't think it is. And secondly, how would that occur? How would those permitted development rights be withdrawn?
Through you, Chair. So the conservation team, yes, they've objected to the proposal. I think they've just highlighted their other concerns. So if this was granted, it would be C3 use, which is residential, so therefore would benefit from permitted development rights. These rights vary from extensions to alterations to outbuildings to boundary treatment, etc. When planning permission is granted for residential use, the local planning authority has the power to remove permitted development rights. There has to be a clear reason why, such as impact on the conservation area, etc. So, but in this case, the officer recommendation is refusal. So we haven't addressed permitted development rights because we're recommending refusal on the application.
Yeah. Can I bring in our Chief Planning Officer for some points of clarification?
Thank you, Chair. Members, as you go into the debate tonight, obviously you've heard a lot of information and you'll consider that information. I would encourage you to focus your debate on the information that's in the report before you. And if you are minded to support this application and based on any other information that was discussed in the room tonight, my question would be whether the right delegation was in place for any additional comments to be made that may influence your decision making tonight. So it's with that in mind, I encourage your debate to focus on questions of clarification based on information in the report and any follow-up questions with officers. Thank you.
With that in mind, are there any questions of clarification before we go into the debate? Councillor Slade.
Can I just ask about the planning history? So there's a erection of ramp, which is with disabled access, which is fine, but there's a mention of a formation of vehicle access to a cottage. I don't know what the cottage is that it's referring to. Is that on that site or is that an adjacent site?
Through you, Chair. So the L-shaped building actually consists of two buildings. One which is a former schoolhouse and one which is a former church hall. So that are you referring to the 2016? In terms of the cottage, I think it's the former schoolhouse it's referring to. But I think in this case, it's not immediately relevant to the proposal in front of us, but it's planning history, so we provide it within the report.
Could you just clarify the points that you've made in 7.4 about the amenities and that they're not adequate for future occupiers? Right, 7.40.
Through you, Chair. So yes, this was what I was referring to earlier about the third reason for refusal, which is overdevelopment, and looking at the amenity, which is internal amenity and external amenity for future occupiers, which was the plan that I was referring to about having bins and bikes going through one of the units, and the only access to the rear external amenity area being through the unit. There's other things within the report that I haven't gone into, such as where's it gone? Oh yeah, sorry. So just where the mouse is now, there's an external amenity area here, multiple windows on looking at from different units proposed. So that's what I was referring to earlier in terms of internal and external amenity, but that's wrapped up in the third reason for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Yes, it's just one point of clarification. It might be me and I'm looking at the elevation slightly wrong, but where you show the window, I think it's unit 3, where you've got the arrows coming out of it, seemed to show a window on the ground floor, but on the actual elevation, there's no window on the ground floor. Is that correct? Or is that the wrong elevation that we're looking at? If you see what I mean. Because you've got the window that you've circled, right? And then if I'm looking at the drawing, there should be a window directly below that, but there doesn't appear to be one shown on the elevation. So I just wanted some clarification with regard to that.
Through you, Chair. So they're creating a mezzanine level I think, as far as I'm concerned, that is the window proposed. I'm unsure exactly what's shown on the plan there, but I think it's clear that the window proposed on the first floor is shown there, just where the mouse is now.
That one.
Sorry, where Julie had the mouse, I think there should be a window shown on the in there. I think a window should be shown there because that's what's shown on that drawing. So there's, I'm slightly concerned about the accuracy of the
Through you, Chair, I think what we're looking at is the first floor window, which is harmful, and I think that is clearly shown on the plan. No reason for refusal is in relation to a ground floor window if there is one, but I think it's quite clear what window we refer to, and that is the south-facing elevation, so it is the correct elevation. Yeah, I think also, sorry, just to expand, if you look at a cross section on the top right, there's no ground floor window shown, just a first floor window. But I think the key point here is that the reason for refusal overlooking clearly identifies the first floor window, which is harmful.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. But if Councillor Gardner is highlighting that the dining room lacks a window, despite there being one labelled on the ground floor, as he's rightly flagged, there isn't there. I wonder if that merely contributes to the argument presented in the report about the inadequate amenity value of the proposal as set out.
For you, Chair. So yes, so the reason 3 overdevelopment does capture internal and external. Well, it actually states provides poor or future residential amenity standards for residents. So yes, that could be captured under that reason.
Are there any other questions of clarification before we go into the debate? No? Okay, so we will go into the debate on this particular application. Who would like to start? Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. Although this isn't one of my interests, but I also live in St Ives and I'm a town councillor. But I don't want to see this amenity go. I would like to see it being used. But I do sympathise with the church because they do need the facilities in the church as well in terms of like the toilets and the rooms and everything. But I don't think it should come at a loss of this facility. I understand that the first reason was taken away about the marketing of this particular facility. So that's no longer a reason for refusal. But I do agree that the second and third reasons still stand, and I would be minded to, unfortunately, refuse this application.
Is that a proposal?
Not yet. I would like to listen to everyone else.
Thank you. Councillor Niche. Sorry, Councillor Wakeford and then Councillor Niche.
Thank you, sir. I was just trying to rejoin your queue rather than jump back ahead of him, but thank you, Councillor Niche. I respectfully diverge from Councillor Mockball next to me. I think on the amenity value, forgive me, on the principle of development, I think the further information, I think the argument presented in the report was compelling, but the further information that came through in the late reps with clarification of the difficulties finding bookings and the very tiny numbers and the details of local venues in the immediate vicinity makes a fairly compelling case, and officers agree, and that recommendation for refusal has been removed. So the principle of development I'm content with. I think in terms of the other three potential, other three recommended areas of refusal, I suppose if I can scroll up fast enough, I was minded to quote or at least paraphrase the conservation officer. To conclude, so I'm reading paragraph 5.6, final paragraph. Conversion of the church hall to residential can be undertaken in a way that will not harm the character and appearance of the conservation area, but the scheme requires amendments. Current scheme would fail to preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area and should be refused planning permission. Now, I appreciate that's a comment with respect to conservation, but I think I'd take the gist of it as summarising my read of this. We have a need for housing in our district, a facility for which there's not an ongoing viable case, such as to fulfil the requirements set out in the local plan excerpt earlier, which could be used for housing. I'm certainly predisposed to look favourably upon. What I was reflecting on as the report was being presented to us and with the clarificatory questions is whether, as invited by the applicants, we could address by condition the other reasons of refusal, and it feels to me that the second and the third of the original four reasons of refusal, so with respect to the visual amenity at the front and overlooking, feel like they could in principle be addressed by condition, but I think the fourth original proposed reason for refusal, the residential amenity, contributing rather to overdevelopment as the summary category, that requires a more fundamental change. I can't see a sort of conditionable sentences of language that would address the concerns picked out there. So while I think absolutely, not to prejudge anything that we might see in future if it needs to come to us, but in principle, absolutely there could be a residential application put forward on this site that would have capability of being passed. I don't think this is quite it, and I don't think we can go far enough to assist the applicant with conditions. So I am certainly minded to vote for refusal, but we've had an argument opposite prior to me as well, so I'm not going to make a recommendation, make a proposal at this stage, but by all means come to me for a seconder if you need one in due course, Chair.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't quite sure where that was going to start with, but we're almost ended up in the same location. I think in the principle of actually doing it and trying to keep a building in use, I can understand. Obviously, costs of keeping it running is not our worry, concern, should I say, from a planning perspective, although it is from a lot of other people's perspectives. So therefore, looking at it, I mean, my major one was not parking, because again, it's in the town centre. There's plenty of parking close by, but actually is this the amenity aspect of it, and it doesn't quite work when you look at all the plans on it. It's trying to shoehorn stuff in that doesn't quite work within the current building. And I think specifically when you talk about the first floor window, well, yes, I mean, it clearly overlooks, it's really close. I mean, you've mentioned the distances in there of how close it is. I mean, I think it's half the accepted norm. And yes, you could put blackout blinds and paint them black, but of course it just doesn't make that acceptable in my view to have a bedroom that you actually don't get. Well, if you did have a view, it'd be somebody else's bedroom or other room, which would be interesting, or not, as the case may be. But actually, from having it opaque, it's still not giving the right amount of light, etc. in that. So I think from that one alone, I think it fails. But I do think it is possible, as Councillor Wakeford said, is that something could, but it's not this. We're too far apart on conditioning all sorts of stuff. We have an application in front of us, and I think it fails to demonstrate right and properly that this is the right application to deal with this building. So therefore, I'm minded. No, actually, I'll propose that we accept the recommendation of the officer that it's refused, and it's numbered in R's 2, 3, 4, I think, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. But so I'm happy with the officer's recommendation of refusal.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second Councillor Nish's proposal there. And I think for me, it's quite well summarised on page 69 when it talks about the amenity there. You know, it's unclear from the drawings whether the proposed units would meet the National Internal Space Standards. A number of other issues about access, I think, as Lewis put in his report, you need to basically get access from one apartment by going through another. Seems incongruous to me. And on 7.41, the proposed side access for units 2 and 3 located down a newly created long side access path, which I think I probably walked down with Councillor McAdam last Friday, and it is very narrow and not particularly safe or secure. So I think, among other reasons, I'm happy to second the proposal to accept the recommendation and refuse permission.
Are there any other comments for this debate? In that case, I will go with Councillor Nish's proposal to refuse this application, along with a seconder from Councillor Sanderson and from Councillor Wakeford. All those who are minded to refuse, please raise your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's unanimous.
So that has been refused. We will just take a 5-minute break. So if you want to get a drink or stretch your legs, please do so, and please return in 5 minutes. on item 3D. It's a planning application for Erith. Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. I will introduce our planning officer, Lucy Bateman, who will be bringing this next application to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This application is referred to DMC as the officer recommendation of approval is contrary to Erith Parish Council's recommendation of refusal. The application site comprises a roughly rectangular parcel of land to the rear of 37 High Street, and there's an existing access from Chapel Road. The site falls within the Erith Conservation Area. The site is currently used as a car park associated with 37 High Street. This was formerly a pub and guest house, but is now a house in multiple occupation. The application seeks planning permission to erect a two-storey, four-bed dwelling in the existing car park area. The site is surrounded by residential properties to the north and west on Chapel Road, and the host dwelling, number 37 High Street, is to the south. There is a public footpath to the east, and beyond this, the small building is the former surgery, which is not currently in use. As set out in the officer report, the site falls within the built-up area of a small settlement and is therefore acceptable in principle in accordance with policy LP9 of the local plan. The proposed dwelling would be set back approximately 6 metres from the front of the site, and this is in keeping with the front building line of the adjacent dwelling, number 28 Chapel Road. The officer report sets out that the resultant plot size and the siting of the dwelling is not considered to appear out of keeping with surrounding development, and the dwelling could be comfortably accommodated within the site with a sufficient level of external amenity space to the rear. The dwelling would have a simple pitched roof design, and this would be similar to the adjacent dwelling, number 28 Chapel Road. The proposed materials, it's considered that these would reflect the surrounding area. The conservation team were consulted on the application as the site falls within the conservation area. They've raised no objection, and they don't consider that the development would cause harm to the character or appearance of the conservation area. The proposal would result in the loss of an existing car park area associated with number 37, which, as I've previously said, is a house in multiple occupation. There is, however, a further parking area located to the south of the High Street, and that's the gravel area you can see in the photograph. This has historically been used as a car park associated with number 37 and its former uses, including as a guest house and pub. The site location plan you can see there outlined in blue. This area shows sufficient space for 8 parked cars, and officers consider that this would meet the needs of the house in multiple occupation, which has 7 bedrooms. It's recommended that a condition be imposed to ensure that the land to the south of the High Street, so that's the area in blue with the 8 parking spaces shown, is kept as car parking only for the occupants of number 37 to ensure that adequate car park provision is retained. This photo is taken from the existing access of the car park, looking south towards the rear of number 37 High Street. You can see that there's a flat roof building and boundary fence. This will be removed and the boundary will be moved further south, and this would be incorporated in the proposed garden of the dwelling. This shows the relationship with number 28 Chapel Road to the west, and this has a recent single-storey side extension with high-level obscure glazed windows and roof lights. As set out in the officer report, it's not considered that there would be any detrimental adverse impacts to this neighbouring property in terms of overbearing or loss of privacy. This photo shows the dwellings on the other side of Chapel Road to the north. The low front boundary fence that you see here will be removed, and this would be an open frontage. There'll be a driveway with 2 parking spaces and additional parking space to serve the annex, which is associated with number 37 High Street. And lastly, this is a photograph of the public footpath that runs along the eastern boundary of the site. The rights of way team at the County Council have raised no objection to the proposal, but this is subject to the inclusion of informatives to ensure that the footpath remains unobstructed. Officers are recommending that the application be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in section 8 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do not have any speakers for this particular application, so we'll go straight to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask a question about 7.23. In what way could we condition that the land to the south of the High Street is kept as car parking, but only for the applicants of 37 High Street? How could that be enforced?
We could use a Grampian condition to enforce that. The land is outlined in blue, so it's within the applicant's ownership.
Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, on the photographs, they're showing quite a large tree on the left-hand side, which will be outside of the site. I appreciate that, but it's not shown on the drawing. I just wonder, what effect will that have on this proposed dwelling? It's quite a large tree there, isn't it? That, I'll show you that on there, that one there. And the proposed building is in this area. That's just my concern that that would be overhanging the development. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So that photograph's actually showing the car park on the High Street. So that would be retained as a car park.
Oh, that's the other one, yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officer? In that case, we'll move on to the discussion. Who would like to start our discussion? Councillor Wakeford.
Solely in absence of other hands, Chair. Seeing as how our only arguments for refusal are summarised in 7 lines in paragraph 5.1 from the parish council in their absence to speak to them more fully, and seeing as how the points there, the most significant one appearing to be around parking, which we've addressed in presentation, I don't see any basis for us to be refusing this, and would be happy to propose we follow the officer recommendation and approve. But should colleagues wish to come in more fully first, open to hearing them.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm a little disappointed not to have a member of the parish council here so that we can ask them more about their recommendations, but I would like to second Councillor Wakeford's proposal.
Councillor Gardner.
It's all right, thank you, Chair. I was going to second the motion, so I'm quite happy.
Thank you. Councillor Nee.
Thank you, Chair. For fairness and consistency throughout my time on DMC, I will personally complain to the Parish Council for not turning up and potentially wasting our time, not actually answering the questions we might have to answer.
Okay, if nobody else wants to contribute to this discussion, then I will take the proposal to approve from Councillor Wakeford and to second from, was it Councillor Davenport Ray? All those who are in favour of approval, please put up your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So that has been approved. Thank you. So that takes us to the end of our agenda. Oh, no, it doesn't. Sorry. So we'll move on to item number 4. So there are appeal decisions. So I will hand you over to our planning service manager.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep it brief. We've had 4 appeal decisions in the last month. One appeal was allowed. That is a householder application for the conversion of a garage to a bedroom. The inspector considered there was no impact on the street scene, so therefore allowed the appeal. And that concludes the appeal decisions. Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Davenport Ray.
I noticed that one of the appeals was on a non-determination. Under what conditions is a non-determination appealed?
A non-determination appeal is when the local planning authority do not make a decision within a timely manner, so therefore it goes over the 8 or 12 weeks without an extension of time being agreed with the applicant. So once that happens, any time within the 6 months of the date of permission of the application being submitted, they can appeal to the Secretary of State for non-determination. So he will take the decision away from the LPA.
Thank you. Councillor Nee.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting they've been quite quick on some of these, yet some other appeals seem to be taking quite a long time, don't they? I refer, of course, to the one that Councillor Conboy and myself dealt with in December, and we're still waiting.
And I believe the Pure Fuels inquiry was on the 4th of April, so we're still waiting for the response to that. But early days, though.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to the end of our agenda. I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and contributions this evening. Thank you also to the planning officers for your hard work in presenting the applications this evening. Lastly, I'd just like to say thank you.